We're seeing a really even competition. We're seeing if teams drop off 5 or 10%, they just don't have, no team's really got the depth now to cover, injuries or, just a drop of form with your key players.
Hey folks, there's an awesome end of season footy tournament happening in Thailand later this year, and you don't want to miss this one. The Australia's #1 globally touring Masters football club, the Slugs, they're playing in an end of season footy tournament in Phuket on October 26th. It's for over 35s, and it's a 12-a-side one-day tournament involving teams across Asia at the beautiful Alan Cook ground, one of the truly unique sports grounds in the world. It's where Masters footy meets paradise. For more details, check out the Southern Slugs Football Club Facebook page and get involved. Thank you so much to our new sponsor, the Woodville Districts Basketball Club. They compete in South Australia's junior and senior basketball competitions. They're one of just 10 member clubs in Basketball SA's competitions. They provide complete pathways from 6-year-olds to seniors to state and national representation. And I happen to be their court announcer. Well, what a pleasure it is in the lead up to the AFL Grand Final for 2024 to have the 2005 premiership coach with the Sydney Swans, also a man who's played 356 games of football in the AFL, AFL Hall of Fame inductee, 7-time best and fairest and 5-time All-Australian as well. His name is Paul Roos. Roosy, great to have you on Sports Legends with Bevo.
Thanks, mate. Good to see you again.
Likewise. As I just mentioned, it's the big grand final this weekend. Your beloved Sydney Swans are going to be in it against the Brisbane Lions. How'd you see both of those games last weekend?
Yeah, look, I thought the Sydney Port game was a little bit disappointing, not from a Sydney point of view because they won convincingly, but I thought Port were really disappointing. And Sydney did enough and had some really good players and played extremely well. So they got through to the grand final really comfortably and in good form. I thought the Brisbane Lions Geelong game was as good a game as I've seen this year. I thought that was an exceptional game of football. Both teams came to play. Both teams played at or near their best. And I thought Brisbane, that's the best I'd seen Brisbane play all year. So, look, great lead-in for both teams and looking forward to the grand final.
And what do you think the keys are for the Sydney Swans to break that hoodoo? And obviously the last premiership was back in 2012. Big challenge against last year's grand finalists, the Brisbane Lions. But what do you think the keys are to beat the Lions?
Yeah, Lachie Neale obviously is a key. And I think Dane Zorko off half-back. I think they're probably, if you're looking at the two key players, and they've got more than two players, but if you start with that, I think maybe James Jordan goes to Zorko and tries to calm him down. He's a really, really good player off half-back and just sets up the Lions with his ball use and his run, and he can kick goals as well. So, and I think Lachie Neale around stoppage is exceptional. But again, one of their strengths is their depth. I mean, they've got some really good players. So, I think both teams would be looking to nullify the opposition slightly, but obviously, control what they can control and play as good a football as they can play.
And looking at the Sydney Swans season so far, obviously they had such a great start to the season, bit of a lull, a couple of games there, particularly that Port Adelaide one where they lost by 112 points, and some people started questioning whether they were going to be good enough to go all the way. But how have you seen their season? And, did you have a few concerns going through that period where they lost those few games in a row?
Well, I think we saw this year that most teams went through a down period, whether you started poorly like the Brisbane Lions, started red hot like Sydney Swans. Every team this year seemed to go through significant slumps. So from that point of view, I really wasn't worried about the Sydney Swans. I probably wasn't that worried about the Brisbane Lions when it happened in the first 5 or 6 weeks. The only problem is when you do that as opposed to what Sydney did. I mean, Brisbane was sort of chasing their tail all year, whereas sort of Sydney were able to get through that patch and still stay on top of the ladder, really. But I think both teams had similar seasons, some really, really good form and a run of really good form, and then, some bad period throughout the season, which Sydney's was later on and Brisbane's was early in the year.
Do you think when Sydney had that period, do you feel as though they might have been getting trained extra hard, having been a coach for the Sydney Swans and taking the team to that premiership success in 2012? Did you feel as though, perhaps there was that period where they might have been trained that extra, and trying a few different things as well with players and different positions and stuff going into the finals? Or like you said, it was just a period where side just went through those lulls this year?
It's hard to tell about the training because unless you're inside the footy club, but I think it's significant. It really signifies how even the competition is at the moment, particularly the top half of the ladder. I think we're seeing a really even competition. We're seeing if teams drop off 5 or 10%, they just don't have. No team's really got the depth now to cover, injuries or just a drop of form with your key players. So I think it was more that. I think it's just indicative of where the competition's at, really.
And back in 2012, when you took the Swans to the ultimate glory and broke a 72-year run, Roosy, winning that 2012, 2005, I should say, you obviously a part of the 2012 was the most recent one. What was the culture like with the Bloods, that I guess made it such a strong club in 2005, and we've seen that same success making grand finals over the years and continuing to playing finals as well.
Yeah, I think the significant. We had a meeting down at Coffs Harbour at the end of 2002, going to 2003 season. It probably transformed the club. The players really embraced, the empowerment that we gave them, and then Stewie Maxfield became captain under that first model. And Stewie was just an outstanding role model and really set the scene for the leaders. After that, we had good leadership groups. We had really strong standards. We built really good relationships. And Johnny Longmire was part of that meeting and part of setting up the initial, Bloods culture. And he's done a fantastic job, as have the captains, under Johnny Longmire, post Stewie Maxfield, have done an amazing job to continue to hold everyone accountable. But the culture's really endured over the last 20 odd years, which is fantastic to see.
And what do you think makes Horse such a great coach as well, that we've seen that success with the Swans?
I think the ability to build relationships and also hold people accountable to really high standards. The Swans have got high standards, but they also have really good relationships among players and coaches. And it's really hard to do. It's hard to build really strong relationships and also hold people accountable to really high standards. I think he's done that extremely well.
And yourself personally, what was it like to win that premiership back in 2005 and break such a long hoodoo? And tell us about who led some of the celebrations on those nights, Roosy.
Yeah, look, it was amazing. 72 years, obviously a long time. And, to break the drought and to see the fans celebrating, all the past captains and leaders and administrators and even the guys that put in a heap of money during that private ownership period was huge. The celebrations that night, the next day, at Lakeside Oval, and then going back to the SCG, and then the parade in Sydney on the Monday. And to be honest, by the time I was coaching, I wasn't leading the celebrations, so I was happy to take a back seat and watch the players. But look, everyone had a good time. The fans did. Everyone at the footy club did. The coaches, the players. It was certainly a significant time in the club's history.
And were there some of the players that were, I guess, best on ground in those celebrations that you like to watch there, Roosy?
Oh, look, Brett Kirk was always at the forefront of some of the celebrations back then. There's no question. But I think the good thing about the club, they're a really respectful club. Even the celebrations, they went around that in a humble manner and, obviously enjoyed themselves. But it's a really family-orientated club. The grand final night celebration was amazing. And the fans just loved it as well. It wasn't just about the players and the coaches, but the fans, the administrators. A really close football club, as it is still to this day.
And after the Sydney Swans, of course, you went and coached at Melbourne. How'd you find your time there? And was it, sort of speaking to a couple of friends this week, they said that perhaps the Adelaide Crows and some other clubs might have approached you as well, Roosy, past your time at Melbourne. Is that true?
Oh, you always get a sneaky inquiry from certain clubs, but post Melbourne, I'm living in Hawaii now, so unless the Hawaii Eagles come into the AFL competition, I can't see myself coaching again.
But you certainly enjoyed your time at Melbourne as well?
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. It was a really different job, obviously coming from 2 wins and 6 years of losing. And Peter Jackson was fantastic. He was really honest in how what the club was like. Glenn Bartlett was terrific as well. So, the work we were able to do there over 3 years that I was there with, some of the guys that I brought in, the Sydney coaches, Jade Rawlings was there, did a fantastic job. Josh Marnie, Todd Viney. It was a real collective, group of people coming in, and Nathan Jones, the work he did, Jack Viney, to get the club from 2 wins to 10 wins in 3 seasons was, it was hard work. There's no question about that, but really enjoyable. And to see them win the premiership, was fantastic as well.
And you mentioned before you spent last 10 years in Hawaii. Your wife Tammy's from there, of course. And tell us what life's like over there and the difference between living in Hawaii and living in Melbourne, and also a bit more about your business, Performance by Design.
Yeah, so we sort of moved over full-time in the last 3 years. Yeah, probably the biggest difference is the weather. Yeah, the weather in winter is about 25 degrees and the weather in summer is about 28 degrees. So the biggest decision I've got to make each day is what colour T-shirt to wear and a pair of shorts. I don't think I've had a wind cheater over there since I've lived there, which is fantastic. So, it's a really healthy lifestyle, a really good life. And it's only 10 hours back to Australia, so I get back regularly, which I really enjoy with the company Performance by Design. And that's why I'm here at the moment. It's a leadership culture business. So I'm back here to do some workshops and work with some clients, which is fantastic. So I really enjoy that. I really enjoy passing on my knowledge to clients. My business partner is Jared Murphy, who ran the performance at the Geelong Footy Club, under Bomber Thompson. So that's really proud as well, when he and I see what the Sydney Swans have done and what the Geelong Football Club have done under Bomber Thompson and now under Scotty. Amazing success from both those two teams. So getting back here and doing work Performance by Design is really rewarding.
And what do you feel the skills are, or I guess the strengths are in making someone that's to be such a good leader like yourself, and I guess some things that you've taken from being involved as a coach of the Sydney Swans and also the D's?
Yeah, I think there's similarities. There's great similarities between great leaders in sport and great leaders in business. Communication skills, being honest, being vulnerable, being yourself, understanding you don't have to know everything as a leader. I think self-awareness is really, really important, what I'm good at, what I'm not good at, and bringing people along. Leadership is about influence. It's about getting people on the journey with you and understanding what you're good at, empowering your staff, trusting your staff. So there's so many factors that go into being a great AFL coach, and there's so many similar factors that go into being a great leader in the corporate world.
And you're also really big on meditation, and you mentioned previously, when we've talked before on Legends of Bevo and other chats you've had as well, Roosy, that's a big part of your life during your playing and coaching career and now post-footy as well. Why is meditation such an important thing to you, and explain a bit more about what you do there?
Yeah, I got introduced to meditation with my wife. We did a course, 20 odd years ago, and I started meditating then. And, my wife teaches meditation. We introduced it to the Sydney Swans which was groundbreaking back in 2003. And it was significant in us winning the premiership. We did a lot of it at Melbourne, both meditation and visualization. It was significant in getting that team from 2 wins to 10 wins. Really, it's about quietening the mind and giving yourself a mental break and about being able to, people talk about focus and being present, but our minds are so noisy and we're so busy, and people think, by getting a good night's sleep, which is extremely important. But I've just recently, Jerry Seinfeld, I heard speak about meditation recently, which was fantastic. He talked about resting your mind and calming yourself down, and football's a really stressful business and really high pressure business. And there's no doubt the meditation helped me as a player, but certainly as a coach, and it helped the players, and it certainly helped the players at the Melbourne Football Club as well.
And what's life like over in Hawaii? Tell us about a typical day for Paul Roos over there.
Yeah, depending on how much work I've got. I mean, one of the few benefits of COVID is the Zoom world, and the world is more connected now. More and more business are more comfortable to have Zoom meetings, have Zoom workshops, and it's probably saved some companies money in terms of flying their staff around. So depending what my work schedule looks like, but I typically get up in the morning, meditate before I do any exercise. I pretty much exercise every day, go for a swim, do my work. The time difference is fantastic, because even if I've got an early start, an early workshop at 8, in the morning, Australian time, that's normally midday. So you get your mornings to yourself, which is really, really good. And then you get to enjoy the Hawaiian lifestyle of sun, surf, and health. I'm not a great surfer, but every now and then I get out and do stand-up paddle. Every now and then I get out and surf. I was an old surf mat guy from Wilson's prom days, so I really didn't have a chance to get on the surfboard back then, because I was down at Fitzroy when I was about 16 years of age. So tend to fall off the surfboard more than I stand up.
I know exactly what you mean with that. I had to go on urban surf a few months ago and got absolutely cleaned up. My board went in the air and landed hit me in the head. So it's not easy after doing bodyboarding for many years. It's a different ball game, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is. Well, when you start on the surf mat, which was just a rubberized sort of rectangular mat back in the 70s, I had a kneeboard, which wasn't as hard as a surfboard. I kneeboarded for a little while down at the prom as well. So, yeah, surfing, learning anything when you're older in life is difficult. That's for sure.
Yep, definitely agree with that one. And what do you think the secrets are to staying fit and keeping so healthy, like you are in your 60s now, Paul? And what advice have you got for others?
I think keep it simple. Do something you enjoy, whether that's walking the dog, walking around the park. I think sometimes we overcomplicate health. Eat well. You don't have to eat unbelievably well, but make sure you eat. If you're going to eat some junk food, moderation. Try and have salads every now and then, and make sure you're just eating a really good, healthy, well-balanced diet, and make sure you're exercising, doing something. I still enjoy running, and I'm lucky I can still run. I enjoy playing tennis. So I'm lucky I can still do that. I enjoy playing basketball, so I get out and every now and then compete against my two sons and try and beat the crap out of them, which I don't have a lot of success at now. And it's 61. But I think that's the thing. Don't overcomplicate your health. Just make sure you're eating relatively well and doing as much exercise as your body allows you to do.
Speaking of your sons, you're close, very close to both of them, and Dylan and yourself have gone into business and doing some bits and pieces together. Explain a bit more about that.
Yeah, Dylan does some mentoring with young men, young boys, Prince to King. We're also developing a leadership program as well, which we're doing it as we speak, sort of thing. So I'm really enjoying that part of it as well, because no one's really teaching leadership and mentoring. Yeah, I was really fortunate to go to Fitzroy when I was 16, so I had great mentors, and I think I was a really good parent as well. But there's a point where I talk about it. There's a point where your kids stop listening to you when it's about 13 or 14. So they need really good mentors, around you. That could be your auntie, your uncle, friends, coaches, football. I remember my under 13 football coach, my under 13 basketball coach, my maths teacher. So what Dylan's done is develop that into a mentoring program, and I'm helping with that, and we're developing a leadership component as well to that.
And in terms of your own sort of growing up, your parents divorced fairly young. You mentioned that previously before, and I guess what influence did they have on your footy career, and how did you deal with them being divorced? Was there some challenges there as well?
Yeah, I was really lucky that when I say they're lucky, I wasn't lucky they divorced, but they didn't divorce until I was probably 19 or 20. So when I was growing up, we had a really good, strong family, dad, sort of traditional family back then, where dad went to work and mum really, dropped us off at training. I played basketball and tennis and football, obviously. And, pretty much every night was activity. Every night was some sort of sport. We'd have dinner together as a family. I lived in Donvale. It was about 150 metres from school. So I walked to school. Sometimes I rode my bike to school because I was pretty lazy back then. I wanted to sleep in. But my parents had a huge bearing on my ability to play sport. They were both really active in the tennis club. My dad was president of the Donvale Tennis Club. My mum was a fantastic tennis player, which was great. So, yeah, they were integral in my success because we had a really strong family background. And when they broke up, I was already out of home. I bought my first house when I was about 21 or something like that through football. So it probably didn't impact me as much as my brother and sister was still at home, I think, from memory. So, I had a good relationship. My dad passed away about 7 years ago. I always had a good relationship with my mum and dad as well. But thankfully, they were together when I sort of grew up, which was really important because they were both strong role models for me.
In 2008, you were named Australian Father of the Year. What did that mean to you? And I guess what have you learned from having parents like you had that were so supportive, like you just mentioned, that you've now taken on to in terms of being a father to your own two children?
Yeah, I mean, that was amazing to be named Australian Father of the Year, while I was coaching. And we were really strong. When I decided to coach, it was Tammy and I and the boys. The boys were really young, but we did it as a family, and I don't like this term work-life balance. It just seems bizarre that, it wasn't like I was a coach without kids and a wife when I went to Sydney Swans, and I was still a coach when I went home. It's about life balance. how do you balance your life out, with what you do? And we had a really good life balance. But look, I learned off my parents. I always say to my two boys, I hope I was a better parent than my parents. And that's no disrespect to them, learning their strengths and weaknesses. And I hope that Dylan and Tyler are a better parent, better father than I was. I hope they learned from my strengths and learned from my weaknesses. I think that's what life should be all about. But I had really good role models in my parents, and hopefully the boys would say the same. But I hope, as I said, I hope Dylan and Tyler are a better father than I was. That should be their goal.
I love that. And congratulations, obviously, in that 2008. Pretty amazing award, like you said. Now, I want to get back to basketball because a friend of mine and a mutual friend of ours, Alex Starling, great to see him playing now for the Adelaide 36ers in his second season. And people that may not know Alex is very close to playing AFL footy and lived with you for a bit of time, Roosy. And he also asked when he's going to play one-on-one against you next. But tell us a bit more about your relationship with Alex.
Yeah, it's a great story. I love Alex to death. He's just a really good friend of mine. He came out. We did some research in America on American basketball players. He came out to play with the Sydney Swans, and he would have played AFL football. There's no question about it. His athleticism was off the charts. His improvement over a short space of time in AFL football was unbelievable, but unfortunately he had a stress fracture of his shin. So due to sort of legalities, we couldn't actually sign him. He came to Australia to play football, but it was easier for him to play basketball. He persevered for many, many years, despite the amount of time I beat him in one-on-one. And that's, that was really credit to him. I beat him consistently, but he fronted up the next day and he tried to beat me. I beat him again. I beat him again. He eventually got on the Adelaide 36ers list. It's a great, perseverance because he's playing, I think it's NBL 1. It's called, and he always dominated. And I remember I spoke to Gazy about him when Gazy was coaching the Sydney Kings. I said, mate, there is this guy that you have to get playing for you. But unfortunately, at that stage, he was considered an import. But once he got his Australian citizenship, the Adelaide 36ers snapped him up. Like a really, really good story, really good individual. And in all seriousness, an unbelievable athlete and dominates NBL 1 and probably should be playing more minutes for the Adelaide 36ers. High quality individual. And I can't speak highly enough of him. I love him to death. He's just had a young daughter. I'm really proud of him, and we're really close, and he's really close to our family. He came to Hawaii not recently, and I always joke about him because I did have a strong basketball background. I actually played state basketball and state football when I was a young kid. But he is a little bit more athletic than me, but I always joke with him that he's too scared to play against me now.
I'll make sure I get that feedback back to him tonight. And what made you choose footy over basketball and the other sports that you played as well?
Yeah, back then when I was playing basketball, really the goal was to play in the Olympics and to sort of think you're going to be one of the best 12 players in Australia. Damien Keogh was just above me. And Andrew Gaze was just below me. I was sort of in that middle group. And once you get invited to Fitzroy, you sort of forget about basketball because it just seemed a lot more logical to be able to play AFL football. Not that I ever thought I was going to play. You just go down there. But I love basketball. I've always had, and I loved it. It was, great coaches, great systems, and I really enjoyed playing basketball. And I went back to playing basketball when I finished playing football, which was fantastic as well. I played, at Alexander in Sydney. Really enjoyed it. Still enjoy getting out and shooting and having fun. I played with Gazy one year when I was working on the couch because, as we know, Gazy runs basketball in Australia. So typically, anyone that's played basketball in any competition, you sort of, depending on what time to start, but let's say you start at 5, then the next game's at 5:50, the next game's at 6:40, the next game's at 7:30. Next game's at 8:20 and 9:10. And you sort of rotate through there. So the 9:10 games are really late. But when Andrew Gaze is on your team, every game is at 5 o'clock. Every single game, every week's at 5 o'clock. So what that meant is that Alistair Lynch and I could play. I would fly down for on the couch. And because it was every week was at 5 o'clock, I got to play. So that's how Gazy just rules everything in basketball. But it was... Can I tell this? It was an absolute pleasure to play with Gazy because he just propped himself on the three-point line. I think Lynch and I were the only two that played defence, but we pretty much passed it to Gazy And it was a really strong competition. There were some great players that were playing in the competition, but it was an app. He didn't even warm up. We'd talk in the warm up, and then he'd have a couple of 3-point shots, and then maybe in the game he'd miss his first one, or maybe every now and then miss his second one, and then he'd hit 9 in a row, or 10 in a row, or 11 in a row, or 12 in a row, and it's like, this guy is unbelievable.
He'd let you know about it though, wouldn't he? Surely.
Oh, he's pretty humble, Gazy. As much as it's hard for me to say that, he's pretty humble guy. Well, one of my favourite sporting heroes in Australia is Andrew Gaze, because I just love what he did for Australian basketball, and he's just such a great human being.
Well, I have to mention Phil Smythe, who's a mate of mine, and you obviously know pretty well too, Roosy. Pretty handy basketballer too. Quite often people sort of put him up there in the same category as Gazy.
Oh, look, that era of Australian basketball with Phil Smythe and even before that, they had some great players, but, Phil Smythe and Larry Senstock and Danny Morsou and, all those pioneers that I remember, when I was a kid growing up at the Nunawading Spectres, and Dean Templeton and, some of these guys that have played a lot of basketball. Lindsay Gaze, an icon, Andrew's dad, but Phil Smythe, great guy, unbelievable basketball player. I just used to love watching the Olympics with those guys. Eddie Palabinskas was a superstar, going back before Gazy. We've always had amazing players going to the Olympics.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely spot on. I'll just finish off with a couple more for you. Toughest opponent that you played against when you were playing for Fitzroy and also the Swans?
Oh, look, Terry Danaher was an underrated player. I know he's rated highly at Essendon, but terrific player. Stephen Kernahan, Wayne Carey. They were probably three of the best players that I played against, no question.
And best you played with?
Oh, the best I played with at Fitzroy were Gary Wilson and Bernie Quinlan, and at Sydney, Tony Lockett and Paul Kelly.
Best player you coached?
Oh, wow. Best player I coached.
I'll let you do a couple.
Probably, the person that everyone talks about is Adam Goods. He's talented, and his best was as good as anyone I've seen. Probably the one that should never have been able to do what he did was Leo Barry. Leo Barry played at fullback at 184 centimetres and 84 kilos and played on some of the best, Matty Lloyd, Fraser Gehrig. Just what he did was quite extraordinary. So, but I was fortunate to coach some, great play. Nathan Jones. I love Nathan Jones as well.
And also, obviously, big game Saturday, Sydney's your tip. How much by and who wins the Norm Smith?
I reckon it's going to be a really close game, and I'll go Sydney 1 point, Isaac Heaney, Norm Smith.
Love it, Roosy. Well, thank you so much for joining us on Sports Legends with Bevo on such a busy week, and hopefully get to meet you in person and say thank you one of these days as well.
Good on you, mate. Good to chat. Thanks a lot.